Fantastic. Welcome and thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Natasha Coral, and I'm the president of the California Music and Culture Association, an alliance of venue owners, operators, industry professionals, artists, and fans dedicated to the preservation of music and culture in San Francisco. This is our 6th such forum. Tonight, with our co-sponsors, the SF Weekly and Bay Bridge, we bring you a debate between two esteemed gentlemen, Board President David Chiu and Supervisor David Campos, who are both running for California's 17th State Assembly District, which includes 58% of the city and county of San Francisco, including City Hall and the grounds on which you are seated. The winner of this contest will replace Tom Amiano, who won in 2012 with a whopping 86% of the vote. It is absolutely imperative that we send a committed pro-entertainment candidate to the state capitol. Many of the reforms that CMAC has been fighting for on behalf of the industry ultimately need to be enshrined in state law for them to have lasting effect. Otherwise, history has shown us that we will be doomed to fight for the same battles again and again, sapping vital resources and energy, and distracting us from our real goal, which is to create an environment where artists and our entrepreneurs creatively can flourish. It's not an easy task, for once you leave city limits, you encounter a considerably more conservative landscape. Our assemblyman needs to be committed to clever and energetic if he's going to counter the inertia and outright hostility of assemblymen who don't appreciate the difference between the feelings we experience in the Great American Music Hall versus a Chuck E. Cheese. So tonight we offer two honorable candidates, a forum to tell us of their vision for nightlife and entertainment and how they might help us realize our goals in the state capitol. But before I go, I need to do a few more things. On behalf of the board of directors of CMAC, I need to thank the people that have so generously made this forum possible. The SF Weekly, Bay Bridge, Michael Bailey and the staff of this beautiful edifice, the magnificent Fillmore Auditorium, Ben Fong Torres, our good friends Julie Schuchard, who is our vice president in charge of making the impossible happen, Mike Stillman in IT, Lauren Weinstein for timekeeping, DJ Tien, yeah, I'm saying it wrong, sorry about that, T. Mateo, and Mike Ewing on video. No opening statement would be complete without an appeal to those who are serious about their music and culture to sign on as a member and become involved in CMAC, your voice for the other 9 to 5. It's an easy thing to do, it's not expensive, and it's really important. For the more people we are, the bigger our voice in City Hall and beyond. Sign up at cmacsf.org, or better yet, come find one of us. There's a lot of us here, and we want your involvement. It's really, really important. Moderating tonight is a man who himself is a great champion of music and culture. Rock author, columnist, journalist, and broadcaster. A man who is perhaps best known for his association with Rolling Stone magazine, but to us is someone you can watch singing his own version of Everyone Must Get Stoned at the El Rio every Tuesday night. And last night as well, I hear. Mr. Ben Fong Torres. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
or getting banished by Bill Graham, who didn't have much use for us rock journalists. Mr. Fong Torres, you are not welcome on my property. Ah, memories. To be here is to be part of music history, but the San Francisco scene began not only here and at the Avalon Ballroom and at Longshoremen's Hall, among other places, but also in a nightclub. It was at the Matrix on Upper Fillmore that Marty Ballin, with help from his dad, set up a band called Jefferson Airplane as the house band, and where one night a former model named Grace saw them and thought, that looks like fun, and formed her own band, and then joined the Airplane and wound up playing, yeah, the Fillmore Auditorium. At Rolling Stone, my beat included nightlife at the Fillmore, Fillmore West, at the Avalon, and the Carousel Ballroom, at venues large and tiny, all around the Bay Area. Sometimes circumstances take me back further in music history. A dozen or so years ago, I co-produced a CD featuring Larry Ching, who had been a featured vocalist at the Forbidden City, a supper club just outside Chinatown featuring all Asian American entertainers. We got together because of Arthur Dong's documentary about that club and similar night spots that flourished from the late 30s through the early 60s. These clubs showcased pioneer performers who shattered racial stereotypes while the entertained people headed off to war. and many others just out for good food and fun. 50 years later, the club scene remains vibrant. Well, truth be told, it's had its ups and downs, and that's one reason we are here tonight, to hear the two major candidates for Assemblyman's 17th District discuss issues of great interest to the members of CMAC and to the entertainment community in general. Here is how the debate will go, I hope. We flipped a coin backstage, or near there, to decide who will go first, and it's been determined that Supervisor Campos will have the first opening statement, and Supervisor Chiu will have the last closing statement. Questions have been called from CMAC's member base in advance, and as time permits, we will ask questions that come to us via Twitter at #ChiuVSCampos. C-H-I-U, C-A-M-P-O-S. Questions will be directed to both candidates. They will have 3 minutes to respond and then 1 minute to rebut. Now please welcome to the stage the candidates, the President of the Board of Supervisors, David Chiu, and Supervisor David Campos. The opening statements are limited to 5 minutes, and we will begin with Supervisor Campos.
Thank you very much. I want to thank CMAC for hosting this very important forum tonight, and I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out here to Fillmore to be a part of this very important process. Let me say this, that David Chiu and I, we have served together for 6 years. I think that we're both good people. I think we both want what's best for the city. But I do believe that in this election, the city and county of San Francisco, and specifically the 17th Assembly District, has a very clear choice. It is a clear choice because as much as we're good people, we have a different vision for where this city is and where this city needs to go. San Francisco has the amazing fact that it is the wealthiest city in the entire country. We have seen more prosperity in San Francisco in the last couple of years than we have seen in the history of San Francisco. And yet, as we are the wealthiest city in this country, we're also the city that has the fastest growing inequality of any major city in this country. As of 6 months ago, we were second in terms of the level of inequality, right behind Atlanta. And I believe that as of today, we probably are #1. And what I tell people is that we did not get to this level of inequality simply because of macroeconomic forces. We got to where we are because of choices that were made in City Hall that have exacerbated this problem. And every single step of the way, David Chiu, respectfully, has been president of the Board of Supervisors that has overseen this inequality. David Chiu talks about how he brings people together. The sad thing is, though, that the city is more divided now than it has been because the division between the haves and the have-nots is something that we have not seen in the history of San Francisco. And when it comes to nightlife, and I agree with your president, CMAC, I believe that the person who represents the most progressive assembly district in this state has to be very clear about what side of the issue they're on when it comes to nightlife and entertainment. We need to have the most pro-entertainment nightlife member of the State Assembly representing the 17th Assembly District. And if we are going to be honest about our records, let's be honest, my colleague David Chiu has a different vision when it comes to nightlife. And I believe that the legislation that he has put forward time and time again has targeted the entertainment industry and the nightlife community, and that in so doing he has truly been, in the last 6 years, as NIMBY and as anti-nightlife a supervisor as you can get. And as a gay man, for whom nightlife and entertainment is more than just about money, but it's actually part of who I am and why I chose to live in San Francisco. I believe that the person who follows in the footsteps of Tom Amiano has to be aligned with the perspective that nightlife is one of the things that makes San Francisco what it is. And that beyond the millions and millions of dollars that nightlife and entertainment brings into our economy, San Francisco would not be San Francisco without that industry having a presence in this city. And as a gay man, I am tired that this displacement that we are seeing is pushing out of San Francisco the people who have made San Francisco what it is. And I want to talk about the entertainment community and the artists, the drag queens who are having a hard time living in San Francisco. And I think that the reason why someone like Juanita Moore, someone like Aquina, someone like Peaches Christ, they're supporting my candidacy is because they know that in my heart I am committed to making sure that San Francisco keeps the drag queens and the artists that made the city what it is in our city. And I am here to challenge CMAC to get involved in this entertainment community, to get involved, because the choice is clear. We need a champion of entertainment in Sacramento, not someone who's going to fight entertainment every step of the way. Thank you.
Thank you, statement from Supervisor Chiu.
Good evening and welcome to the Fillmore. And thank you so much for having me here. By the way, I've always loved to say that. By way of background, I'm David Chiu, first kid in my family born here in the United States. I was inspired by the civil rights movement, which is why I came here almost 20 years ago to work for a civil rights organization as an Asian American attorney in an organization rooted in the African American community representing Latino immigrants. I also worked as a criminal prosecutor, ran a small business like many of you who run bars and restaurants and clubs here in the city. And at night, I volunteered as a neighborhood association leader, and I also headed up the board of a nonprofit organization focused on building affordable housing. 6 years ago, in 2008, I ran for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors because City Hall was more dysfunctional than we would have wanted it to be. We had elected officials who were unable to get together and deliver for our city. And I'll tell you, you have two David C's up here. We both come from immigrant backgrounds. We both went to Harvard Law School. We're both vertically challenged men of color. The difference between David and I, by the way, we voted together 98% of the time. We are both considered progressive Democrats by any definition of the state of California. The difference between David and I is that he has been unable to get things done at City Hall, and I have been able to deliver. I have been effective for workers. We created 70,000 jobs over the last 4 years, 2/3 of these jobs being outside of technology and innovation, jobs in our bars and our restaurants and our nightclubs and our music venues. I have been effective for tenants, passing legislation to give protections to victims of Ellis Act evictions, to give folks who are facing evictions free legal assistance, to build affordable housing for homeless veterans, for seniors, for youth. I've been effective for working families. I passed a first in the country piece of legislation that gives every worker, if you have a child or if you're taking care of a loved one, the right to request flexible schedules. This is something that President Obama a couple months ago then gave to 2 million federal workers. I've helped to balance massive budget deficits, and today we have the healthiest budget in our city's history. We have money that we are investing in every neighborhood in the city, in public safety, parks, libraries, public health clinics for our homeless. But let me tell you also, David Campos has had very little record in this area, particularly when it comes to entertainment. And let me just talk for a moment about my personal experience with entertainment. I first moved to San Francisco in 1996 to hang out with all of you in the bars and the clubs, the restaurants, and our music venues. I started in my late 20s, a regular happy hour to raise money for nonprofit organizations, thousands of us hitting our city's best bars. I've been known to play the violin on the stage of the Red Devil Lounge. And I might have been seen in Burning Man. That being said, I'm the one who has a record of actually passing legislation to help move our entertainment community forward. And every piece of legislation that I passed in the entertainment area, funny, David Campos voted for it. Never raised these issues before until this campaign. I have passed laws to give the Entertainment Commission more powers to regulate the industry at a time when the Commission was told they couldn't do it themselves. I passed legislation at the suggestion of leaders here at CMAC to provide ground rules so that we knew who would be good party promoters and who weren't up to the task. I was asked by the entertainment community to move forward legislation to make sure that we had safety in and around our clubs. And I'm proud of the fact that after years of negotiations, this month, the Masonic Auditorium is going to be opening. After 6 years of lawsuits and community fights that I helped to bring folks together on, we're going to see one of the most amazing venues in the city. And 4 years ago, I worked with Another Planet to bring $10 million worth of renovations to the Bill Graham Auditorium. We have a lot of work when it comes to entertainment, and I agree with you. We need to make sure that whoever is your next assemblyman here representing Eastern San Francisco needs to be an effective voice for entertainment. That is what I've been doing in every area of governance, and I look forward to having this conversation and continuing to fight for all of you in Sacramento. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Chiu. The first question I have here on my list is, how do you think you differ from your opponent? I believe that both gentlemen have answered that question already. So as your vertically challenged moderator, I'm going to pull an audible and move on to the next question. Let me leave more time for the Twitter questions. All right? So, we'll go ahead. And the first question will go then to Supervisor Chiu. San Francisco has long been a leader of nightlife and entertainment in California. However, our past efforts have often been stymied by conservative legislators in Sacramento. The question, as Assemblyman, would you be outwardly proactive on nightlife and entertainment issues? Please give at least one specific example of how you would distinguish yourself from your opponent on this issue.
So first of all, I think the premise of your question is absolutely true. Whichever of us goes up to Sacramento will likely be among the most progressive in Sacramento. David and I, again, we voted 98% of the time. Over the past 6 years in which we've served, I passed 105 ordinances. David has passed about a third of that. He's been having trouble scoring at the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. Now that being said, I think it's important that we not just talk about issues, which is what David has done. If you heard his opening statement carefully, he didn't talk about what he did. He just talked about things. Not what he's accomplished, but he's been talking. And what I've been talking about is, what are we doing? What are we actually accomplishing? I have tackled tough issues when it comes to entertainment. I have brought together the entertainment community with neighborhoods to make sure that we are moving forward our community in ways that make sense. And when I came into office, there was significant violence in my district around violence. Around Club Suede, you may remember 44 bullets shot, 4 people wounded, 1 person killed. Outside of the Regency Theater, 8 people shot. Outside of the North Beach strip club, 2 people shot, all within a few months. And we had a lot of San Franciscans that thought the Entertainment Commission ought to be shut down and thought that we needed to really tamp down entertainment. And I worked hard over a couple of years, and there are many folks here who worked with me on that, to figure out how we could both promote safety as well as bring about vibrancy. And today I'm proud of the fact that I'm no longer waking up on Sunday mornings to the latest news report of someone being shot outside of a club. We have a long way to go, though, when it comes to our entertainment, and it's important for us to develop support from the more conservative members of the State Assembly. And the fact of the matter is, David Campos, in an early debate, said that he would not work with moderates or conservatives in Sacramento, the same ones who've been blocking the very reforms that we're talking about. After he lost the June primary a few months ago, he decided to cut a couple deals because he knew that folks needed to see that he's able to work with people who differ from him. But at the end of the day, what's important is that we are able to convince a majority of a body that is 10 times the size of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, that is 10 times more conservative. And I do have one strategy in how I like to do that. I'm going to invite them here to San Francisco. I'm going to invite the key members of CMAC to show them all an amazing time. And we are going to win over their votes when they fall in love with the entertainment, the music, and the nightlife that is San Francisco. Thank you.
3 minutes for Supervisor Campos. Do you need the question repeated, Supervisor?
No, I think I understand the question, and let me say that I think that the first thing that we need to do to convince other conservative legislators in Sacramento about the importance of entertainment is to make sure that the person who's actually trying to convince them believes that themselves. And the problem is, David, that if you look at your record, every single piece of legislation just about that you have put forward on the area of entertainment has been to somehow control, limit, curtail. And yes, I've supported that because of the work of CMAC in making sure that the horrible piece of legislation that you introduced was amended to actually be reasonable for the entertainment community. So, but there is a different mentality. David does have a different view, you know, and I'll talk about an article. You gave an interview, David, to SF Weekly, where you talked about your strategy at the time. You wanted to actually take away the permitting power that the Entertainment Commission had, and luckily a number of folks in CMAC and others in the community worked with us to make sure that didn't happen. And you said, you know, that this conversation was needed because you said, and I quote, "This entire conversation started because it was clear that the Entertainment Commission was not doing its job in cracking down on nightclubs." I don't believe that the job of the Entertainment Commission should be to crack down on nightclubs. I think that the job of the Entertainment Commission should be, on one hand, to promote entertainment, and second, to make sure that the industry is held accountable, responsible. Cracking down is not the mentality that I have when I think of entertainment, which is why I am proud that the legislation that I have introduced has actually tried to address issues in a responsible way, but also has recognized the importance of entertainment and nightlife in these neighborhoods. We worked in the mission with Supervisor Wiener to address some of the very old, outdated limitations on alcohol in the special use district in the mission. We worked to make sure that we had responsible nightlife without actually doing what you did, which is to actually increase the limitations on these businesses. I also believe that you have an opportunity to redeem yourself, David, because we are actually taking on an issue that for so many years people have been afraid to take on. And that's actually to have regulations and transparency when it comes to 10B. So I challenge you, if you are so pro-entertainment, will you support the legislation that we are working on with CMAC so that there's finally transparency and accountability in how the 10B program is being run?
Supervisor Campos, your time is up, and we have time for a response from Supervisor Chiu.
So the context of David's quote was during a time period where I literally had residents who were being shot outside of nightclubs. And unfortunately at that time, and Terrence Allen will remember this, and other entertainment commissioners will remember this, there was no action being taken by the Entertainment Commission. And Mayor Newsom at that time was publicly suggesting that the Entertainment Commission needed to be eliminated. And at that time, I think many of us can agree, the Entertainment Commission needed to have more action, needed to have more authority. And the legislation that I passed, which I had proposed, gave the Entertainment Commission more ability to clean up what I referred to at that time as bad apples, so that the clubs that were working well, the clubs that were safe, the clubs that have seen a vibrant and healthy nightlife would be able to succeed and flourish. And that is what has happened since 2009 and 2010, in contrast to what we've seen in the heart of David Campos's district in the Mission, with some of the highest crime rates in the city, for which he has done absolutely nothing.
That's a lie. Supervisor Campos, 1 minute for a response.
Well, it's clear, David started this campaign touting how he was 20 points ahead. Now that he's falling behind, you're going to hear a lot more lack of truth in what he says. The facts speak for themselves. You have yet to answer the question. Will you support the 10B legislation that we're working on and that people are signing in the back of this room? Yes or no?
I'm happy to take a look at it. This is the first I've heard of it, but I do think the 10B program is broken. I think it needs to be fixed, and as I've done with all of my pieces of legislation, working with CMAQ, including a number of pieces of new policies that CMAQ provided to me to carry, not to you, David, to me, because I can get things done. That's what I wrote.
Well, if you're CMAQ, you have to make sure that you go to the NIMBY supervisor first, because at least that gives you a sense of whether or not something actually has the opportunity to be passed.
Our next question goes to Supervisor Campos. Party buses allowing alcohol consumption has become a big problem for venues and neighbors when they pour large parties of intoxicated people out onto the street. CMAQ has proposed legislation requiring alcoholic beverage control licenses for these buses similar to those required on boats and trains. The question is, would you be willing to introduce a bill to put party buses under the jurisdiction of the ABC?
I would be supportive of that effort. I think it makes a great deal of sense. But I want to touch on something that David, has been talking about in this campaign, and this idea that, that when it comes to being a legislator, it really is about keeping score, how many pieces of legislation you can pass at the Board of Supervisors. I actually was a lawyer for elected officials before, and that's not how I see the legislative process. I don't think it's the number of pieces of legislation that you pass, but actually the impact and the substance of the pieces of legislation that you work on that actually dictate how effective you are. And I hope that you're looking at this pamphlet that we're handing out for my campaign, because the focus of our legislation has been on actually helping the lives, improve the lives of people. I don't see legislating as simply about having another notch on my belt, which is one of the reasons I have shied away from going after the low-hanging fruit, and instead have focused on complicated pieces of legislation involving issues like healthcare and other things that take time to get through. Likewise, when it comes to nightlife and entertainment, that's what we have done. We are about to introduce a piece of legislation that addresses a very important point, which is right now, so many entertainment businesses that have been a part of San Francisco for decades are being pushed out. And I am proud to be working with CMAQ and with this community to introduce what we call a legislation that creates a registry of legacy businesses, which covers businesses that are 40 years or older, for the purpose of making sure that these institutions that have made our neighborhoods what they are, that they are protected, and they are protected in this time of displacement. We are talking about 200, at least 200 small businesses, perhaps some that are owned by people that are here, that need action by the Board of Supervisors. And instead of actually giving big corporate tax breaks to these corporations, let's actually do something for the small businesses that are actually keeping this economy going, that are actually hiring from the local community and are actually investing back in these neighborhoods. That is the type of legislative agenda that I have had at the Board of Supervisors and that I will have in the legislature. And the thing about this idea that somehow I'm not able to work with people from different sides of the political spectrum, we have passed legislation in the area of healthcare, legislation in the area of small business, legislation in the area of criminal justice with 8 votes, a super majority of the Board of Supervisors. The difference between David is that I don't have to compromise my values and principles to actually get something through the Board of Supervisors.
Supervisor Chiu, the question was, would you be willing to introduce a bill to put party buses under the jurisdiction of the ABC?
So thank you for repeating the question because I would like to answer it as opposed to dancing around the question.
I said yes.
So the quick answer is yes, I would, but let me say a few things. First of all, there are party buses that work just fine, that transport mature adults who are enjoying themselves and who behave responsibly. In fact, I see Daniel Flores, who is a judicial candidate for judge. He and I actually campaigned on a party bus a couple weeks ago. That being said, on the other hand, we all know, I've heard from my friends who are club owners that there are still too many party buses that are letting out individuals who have had too much to drink into our neighborhoods, who may be underage, and it creates issues of liability for our club owners and our local entertainment scene when bad things happen. And so I absolutely believe we do need regulation. That being said, I'm not necessarily convinced that the ABC is the right agency for that, because the ABC has had a little bit of a record of not working as well with the entertainment community and with CMAC as we would want. And I think we need to make sure that whatever regulatory body does this, does it with our city in a way that makes sense. Now let me also though mention a couple things, because David did speak about his record. If you actually scrutinize his record of the handful of things that he has been touting on this campaign trail, it is a list that includes legislation that's been blocked in court, that hasn't been implemented, or that has had no impact here in San Francisco. I'm sorry to be the person to say that, but unfortunately that has been the case. Let me just talk for a moment about healthcare. David talks about his healthcare legislation. He introduced legislation in 2011. Our city economist said that if it passed in the form in which it was introduced, right now I think there are probably 100 people in this room. There are going to be 400 people who are going to lose their jobs, most of those jobs out of the industries of nightlife, from restaurants and bars. And this is why I had to come in and fix his legislation to make sure that we were protecting those jobs, but doubling the amount of health care that those workers were receiving. Now, after David lost the primary, he had another piece of legislation to do exactly the same thing. But this time, he learned his lesson, because he knew that a majority of us cared about jobs in nightlife, and he was willing to work with us, to work with members of the Board of Supervisors who actually cared about jobs in nightlife, to make sure that folks got their health care, but did this in a way that protected people's jobs. And one thing I'll just mention, I was told by a member of this audience who is out of the Bar Owner Association that when the nightlife world brought these issues and concerns to David Campos, and this is actually in the newspapers, he said that they were, quote, simply crying wolf. And this is why he had to work with all of you, had to work with the rest of us to make sure that we're protecting nightlife jobs.
Supervisor Campos, you have 1 minute for response.
You know, the thing about being effective and delivering, the question is always effective for whom, delivering for whom. And I am proud that the effective that I've tried to be is for working people. And I do believe that it's important to ensure that in a restaurant and a bar, that those workers do have, and their families have access to healthcare. And you're right, I did learn a lesson in the healthcare loophole. And the lesson that I learned is that I needed to work with someone who actually was going to follow through on his commitment, which is why the deal was struck with Supervisor Fillore, who actually understood the significance of actually providing healthcare to these workers. And you know, from what I remember, this legislation that you're talking about, you voted for it as well, David. But I think it's about making sure that we in San Francisco recognize that we cannot be successful, whether it's a business, a city, unless we actually making sure that working people and middle-income people in San Francisco are also doing well.
And 1 minute for response.
I'm proud of this race to be supported by almost 30 labor organizations who represent tens of thousands of working men and women in San Francisco, more organizations than David, because they know that I care about fighting for jobs. Janitors in the mid-market area have jobs because of the work that we did. School employees that I've worked with have endorsed me in this campaign. Firefighters have endorsed me in this campaign. The workers in our supermarkets, at Macy's, our commercial workers, our food workers who are in minimum wage jobs. They know that I have delivered for them, that I have passed first in the country legislation fighting for them. I have been effective for them. And the real issue in this race, again, is around effectiveness and who is truly delivering results, not who's talking about it.
Our next question will go to Supervisor Chiu first. The ABC has recently started placing conditions on some liquor licenses requiring that 50% of their sales be food. This condition is not state law and threatens the existence of our nightclubs and music venues that do not function as typical restaurants, especially those catering to all ages. The question, would you be willing to put forward legislation broadening these conditions so that all age nightclubs and venues can operate legally?
Quick answer, yes. There are a number of issues that I have seen in the past 6 years that are problematic around this 50% food sales standard. First of all, 50% food sales standard, as I've been educated by members of CMAC, is pretty arbitrary. You're trying to predict what your sales are in different areas, as opposed to knowing that you should invest in some sort of food in your restaurants or in your bars. And so I think, one, we should consider whether there are different standards, either a staffing standard or a payroll standard. But secondly, these licenses are really one size fit all. The state said, okay, you can have type 47 or type 48 licenses, but we know that different venues have different needs. AT&T Ballpark is different from Slim's, is different from the Bill Graham Civic Center, is different from any of the thousands of local small clubs or bars that we have in our neighborhoods. And it's important that we think about licenses that work for those. And so I would bring together the stakeholders here at CMAC to really think through what type of licenses work. Last thing I would say is part of the problem, part of the issue is lack of enforcement. We have a lot of good actors, a lot of folks who are playing by the rules, and what I hear constantly is they're playing by the rules, but there are others who aren't, and that creates a real disincentive to follow the rules. We need to make sure that's changed. Now, one thing I'll also say is we have an awful lot of regulation on our small businesses. I believe this as someone who used to run a small business in this city, who actually used to create jobs in this city, and this is why over the last 6 years, my record includes cutting back on unnecessary red tape and fees to our small businesses, streamlining the invoicing process from city government, providing more tax credits and city loans to our small businesses, and most importantly, we eliminated the only in San Francisco tax on worker salaries, and that is something that significantly crippled the nightlife business. We now have a tax that is increased on companies that have larger corporate revenues. We used to have aggressive tax on jobs. We now say that if you are a major company and you make more, you have to pay millions of dollars more. And these are the types of measures that I think move our economy forward. This is what has been credited for why we've created 70,000 jobs in recent years, most of these jobs outside of technology. And unfortunately, David Campos, who has never created a single job in his life, has never been able to move this kind of agenda to make sure that the businesses in our nightlife community are able to succeed, are able to thrive, so the rest of us can have amazing fun. Thanks.
Supervisor Campos, would you be willing to put forward legislation broadening those ABC conditions so that all age nightclubs and venues can operate legally?
Absolutely. I think it's a no-brainer, but let me just be very clear about something in terms of what I think needs to happen with ABC in Sacramento, in my view and my approach. I do believe that ABC has been out of control in terms of how it interacts with this industry. I believe that ABC needs to be overseen by state government, and I believe that we need to make sure that ABC understands the very important role that nightlife entertainment play in not only the economy of a city, but also the culture and life of a city. And what I want you to know is that when I am in Sacramento, I'm going to be a champion who is going to make sure that ABC is held accountable, because I actually think that there is a certain mentality that ABC and quite frankly some in law enforcement have, which is that somehow their lives would be better if nightlife and entertainment did not exist. You know, there was a quote by someone who worked very closely with David, by then Captain Jim Dudley, who basically said, you know, that it would be much better if nightlife just was not around in San Francisco. That it would be better if all the nightclubs were shut. And I think that there are some folks who have that mentality. Now I can tell you that it is true that perhaps the life and the challenges that as a police officer you have would be different. But you would not be in San Francisco, you would not be in the Castro, you would not be in the Mission unless that entertainment industry actually was there. And I think that we need to challenge this mentality that somehow the police department are doing us a favor by letting these businesses operate. The fact is that these businesses are an integral part of these communities, and they are as important a part of those communities as anything else. And so I do think that we need to have someone who's going to challenge that, and who also believes that there is nothing that goes against public safety if you are for entertainment. I served on the San Francisco Police Commission. And I can tell you that the best way to keep a neighborhood safe is to actually have robust community policing that actually makes sure that cops get out of their cars, that they interact with the community, instead of passing these draconian rules that in the end hurt everyone and don't in fact make a community safe.
1 minute for a response.
I think I'll just quickly respond by saying two things. I do agree that the ABC has been problematic on many levels. I have heard it frequently from my friends who run bars and run nightclubs in town. And this is why, unlike David, I wouldn't automatically give the responsibility of regulating party buses over to the ABC. And so I'm actually a little curious as to why, David, you would automatically do that when you just gave a wonderful, rousing speech talking again about how you would fight against the ABC, but no, actually give them now more powers.
Supervisor Campos, your response.
I think the question was about the proposal that CMAQ would put forward that actually provided that to the ABC. I actually believe and trust at CMAQ enough to know that given their experiences with the ABC, that if they're proposing this, it's because they have thought about it, and I certainly would like to hear more about that. But the idea that somehow we as electeds just happen to know better than you who are actually on the ground, I have a different perspective. I actually think that part of the problem with elected officials is that there isn't enough humility and recognition that we actually have something to learn from people who actually are in the industry, who are doing this work day in, day out.
Thank you. Our next question is on the subject of affordability, and we'll begin with Supervisor Campos. Many of San Francisco's creative class can't pay the rent. Question, what have you done and what will you do to help San Franciscans afford to stay? And what's your position on the anti-speculator tax bill on this November's ballot?
Let me say that, David talks about how we voted the same 98% of the time. The reality is that if you look at every member of the Board of Supervisors, whether it's the most progressive, the most moderate, conservative by San Francisco, they vote together 90+% of the times. But I do believe that it is where we have differences that you actually can tell who each and every one of us is about. And it is on those differences where I have made it clear that I believe that we are headed in the wrong direction. That the kind of development that has come out of City Hall, that David has overseen as president of the Board of Supervisors, is a development that is disconnected from reality. Because it's development that puts forward $5 million condos that no one can afford. I think that the reason why you have a Tom Temprano of Hart French, Joshua J., Juanita Moore, Lena, Peaches Price, Don Houston, so many folks that are supporting my candidacy is because they know that I get it. We are going in the wrong direction in San Francisco. We need to make the city affordable. And I actually have made a difference in terms of the legislation that has actually addressed this challenge. You know, David talks about this piece of law that actually increased relocation costs that I passed so that renters have the ability to actually stay in San Francisco. You know, he talks about how it's just, you know, I guess the insinuation is that somehow it's bad that the developers that are funding his campaign have sued us over that law. I actually am proud that we were sued because I actually think that we need to stand up to this community and to say, how much money do you have to make? Is it really enough that you're making millions and millions? Is it too much to ask that you actually give that tenant who's being Ellis Act evicted the fighting chance to stay in San Francisco? Sometimes you do have to take a stand. And I believe that at the end of the day, the courts will show that our law is right, that it's predicated on sound legal reasoning, and it's predicated on this notion that you cannot have San Francisco unless you have a working middle class in San Francisco. You cannot beat San Francisco if all we have are millionaires living in this city. And when it comes to entertainment, you cannot have entertainment without the entertainers. You cannot have entertainment without the entertainers, and the entertainers are not going to live here unless you protect their ability to stay in their apartments and you actually build housing that they can afford.
Supervisor Chiu, the question, what have you done and what will you do to help San Franciscans afford to stay, and what is your position on the anti-speculator tax bill? I'll clear the court. What's your position on the anti-speculator tax bill on this November's ballot?
Thank you, Your Honor. First of all, I support Prop G. We are going through incredible rampant real estate speculation now. We need to make sure that we address it with a measure that both David and I support. Affordability, housing affordability, protecting our tenants is and has been the #1 issue that I care about. And I have been working on this issue for the past 6 years since I came onto the Board of Supervisors. And I have passed over a dozen pieces of legislation to build more affordable housing for seniors and veterans and foster youth, to make sure that victims of Ellis Acts are getting priorities in affordable housing lines, to make sure after a 3-decade debate we've legalized 40,000 in-law units wherein live our most vulnerable San Franciscans, our seniors, our immigrants, our working families. And I've also moved forward building housing in San Francisco. We moved forward about 50,000 units of housing, and let me say, we moved forward rebuilding public housing, which David Campos voted against. We moved forward building affordable housing for low-income folks, which David Campos voted against. He's talking about who's being NIMBY. The NIMBYs in San Francisco are supporting David Campos. And I also think it's a little ironic, you know, this past year, David, if you look at the record, and these are just facts, I'm just telling you facts. We actually have in our campaign, if you'd like to get some information about this, you can see the facts. In 2009, I passed a couple pieces of legislation to move things forward. 2010, I did the same. 11, 12. David didn't do anything while eviction rates and affordability in the heart of his district skyrocketed. Now 2013 rolls around, and he decides to run for office, and in November, for the first time, he calls for a hearing about housing affordability. And this year in 2014, it is absolutely true, David has passed 2 changes to policy. The first, changing the law to give tenants the right to request a hearing. Not particularly effective. And the second, which I was happy to support David on, around how we provide greater relocation payments to tenants who are being Ellis Acted, happy to support him on, has now been stymied in court. So let's talk about who's been effective. Let's talk about who's actually delivering. David, I have to compliment you. You are incredibly articulate. You know how to tell a good story. You know how to hide what you haven't done. But unfortunately, you don't have a record to stand on, and that is why you've spent this entire campaign for the past year attacking me for what I'm trying to get done and deliver for San Francisco.
Response, 1 minute.
You know, David, the fact that you have a tiering section doesn't mean that that everything you say is true. Our workers are actually calling voters right now, which I think is really important. But let me say this, okay? You say that I haven't done anything. Tell that to the thousands of families that are actually getting free muni for low-income and moderate-income youth that we passed years ago when we were talking about the fact that this city was becoming unaffordable for so many working and middle-income families. The fact is that, you know, your campaign is being funded by the big corporate interests that have a very, very important stake in this race. Because they are doing well in San Francisco, and they are doing well because of the policies that you have put in place. And they know that if David Campos is in the State Assembly, that David Campos will make sure that they actually play by the rules that everyone else plays for, and that we protect our working and middle class as much as we protect the big corporations.
So, two responses. David, I'm surprised you're actually bringing up the developer money line for two reasons. One, you brought it up early on in our first debates until the San Francisco Chronicle decided to do analysis of exactly how much money each of us were taking from real estate developers, and it turned out we were taking the same percentage of money. And, you know, it's interesting, in the last few weeks, I think in the last 6 or so weeks, 8 weeks, David has raised apparently $250,000. And I have been told by real estate developers, he is calling real estate developers everywhere to shake him down for money. And let's talk about free muni for youth for a moment. I was happy to support this idea. Excuse me, sir, I hope to have an opportunity to speak. I was happy to support the idea, and David, as you know, you had trouble finding funding for it. And we now have funding for free muni for youth for the next 2 years. Where did it come from? It came from the conversations I had with Google, because Google decided to give our city $6.8 million so that every young person under the age of 18 could ride muni for free. And as someone who doesn't have a
sign my name to put it on the ballot, while you were actually waffling trying to figure out what you're going to do. This is the thing. In Sacramento, we need someone who is very clear about who they are, what side they're on. We don't need someone who's actually trying to see where the wind is blowing, but recognizes that our job is to make sure that our working class and middle income people have a voice in Sacramento. You, great, you support Prop G. What took you so long?
Thank you. Our next question regards...
Could I answer that question for 10 seconds?
Sure, quickly.
David, you know, it was your allies who were working on the measure who didn't share it with my office, so I appreciate that perspective, but it is what it is.
Our next question regards preservation. A member of our audience makes the point that live music venues are not given the same weight in political considerations as some of our other cultural institutions, even though their contribution to culture is just as important. Recently in the press, we see that many of our beloved venues, such as the Bottom of the Hill and the Independent, are being threatened with extinction by encroaching developments. For Supervisor Chiu first, the question is, CMAQ has been discussing the creation of a statewide Historic Venue Preservation Act, which would give venues additional protections when developers propose buildings that interfere with their operations. Would you author and support such a bill?
Absolutely. And I have a record of having worked with historic facilities that need additional work in order to protect them as venues for live music. I mentioned earlier the Masonic. It's a structure that has been around for decades, and it has been proposed to be turned into one of the West Coast's most amazing live music venues to be open this month. When it was initially proposed, I will tell you, my constituents opposed it vehemently. And I worked for 5 years through several lawsuits, through multiple appeals, to try to bring parties together to figure out how we were going to move that forward. And I'm proud to say that we were able to negotiate an agreement such that my neighbors on Nob Hill want to now embrace the world coming to the most amazing music concerts I think our city will sing. And through the work, Live Nation, who's coming into the Masonic, they're going to be sponsoring local music programs for low-income kids. They're going to be supporting more services for homeless residents in the Tenderloin. They're going to be helping to invest in a local neighborhood park. We have created a win-win-win as well as investing in this amazing historic venue. Different example, the Bill Graham Civic Center Auditorium was a structure in need of $10 million of renovations. And I worked with another Planet Entertainment, actually a competitor, rival organization to Live Nation. They have turned that into an amazing venue for people to come see live music. I think this is the model that we need to continue on as we make San Francisco the #1 destination for live music here on the West Coast.
I do think that this is a very important issue, and great minds think alike, CMAC, because what you're talking about is precisely what we are working on and we will be introducing in the next few days. The idea that we have a responsibility in San Francisco to protect these cultural institutions. The concept behind this registry of legacy business is that unless we act now, we are going to find ourselves in 2 years, 3 years, heck, maybe even 6 months, seeing these institutions be pushed out by this huge development that's happening in San Francisco. I believe that we have to protect and step in our cultural legacy. That's why I asked CMAC to come out and make sure that other folks who may be on the fence about this legislation in City Hall actually support it. I think it's unconscionable that we're letting these institutions be threatened by rampant development. And I actually think that unless we act quickly, and we do so as soon as possible, and David, since you're here, you have the ability as president to waive the 30-day rule so that this moves quickly. I would ask you to do that, please, so that we have this measure move quickly, because I think that action is needed. But let me also say that there is a fundamental difference in terms of how I personally see entertainment. Because to me, it's not just about fun, it's not just about money. You know, as a gay man, I came to San Francisco because as a gay man, there is something unique about being in a place where you can be yourself. And for those of us who are queer, nightlife, these clubs, these bars, provided a space that we could not find anywhere else in society. And it is for that reason that for us it is so personal. And when people talk about limiting entertainment and going after bars and going after nightlife, in many respects it's like they're going after an integral part of our community, of our culture, of who we are. And the fact is that the reason why San Francisco is so vibrant is because so many members of this LGBT community have come to San Francisco precisely because of that culture, that nightlife. And that's why for me, it's something that it goes beyond the rhetoric. It's actually something that is very personal, because I think it's defining in terms of who we are as a city. And that's why this legacy legislation, I believe, is one of the most important pieces of legislation that San Francisco can pass for this industry, and to do so now.
David, when I was coming into today's event, you had a supporter who yelled at me that I was anti-gay. And you have sent out mailers suggesting that as well. And I just want to say, as someone who was a founder of Asian Pacific Islander Equality, who fought against the Defense of Marriage Act in the US Senate, who worked alongside Senator Mark Leno to put marriage equality into our Democratic Party platform, who has worked alongside with you and Scott Wiener to make sure that we have adequate funding for HIV and AIDS, for homeless LGBT youth, to help the LGBT Community Center thrive. I want you to know we are all working together to make sure that our community is as diverse and as open and protective of everyone who lives here. And I also just want to point out that if this is indeed the case, I'm not sure why the other gay supervisor on the Board of Supervisors, why the Alice B. Toklas LGBT Democratic Club, and the LGBT newspaper has decided to endorse my candidacy. They know who I stand up for.
1 minute response.
Respectfully, David, I think that you have to be factual in your statements. I think it's low even for you to say that I have accused you of being anti-gay. But what I want to say though is this, that you're right, you are being supported by Scott Wiener. And there's a side of Scott Wiener that I agree with. I think that his support of nightlife is a good thing. But he and I do have a different vision for San Francisco. And the problem that I have is that he, as supervisor of District 8, has been part and parcel of the displacement that's happening in the neighborhood that he represents. And the fact is that it is troubling to me that the policies that you and him have advocated for have led us to the point where the largest number of evictions are actually happening in the Castro. There are people in my community who survive the AIDS crisis who can no longer be in San Francisco. To me, that is troubling and it's really painful.
Thank you. Our next question regards local control. And he will go to Supervisor Campos first. If elected, what would you do to make sure the ABC respects local control, such as San Francisco's noise ordinance, as opposed to the ABC standard of, quote, no sound audible outside the licensed premises? Supervisor Campos.
Well, let me say that I believe in local control. And I actually think that there's a lot of rhetoric in Sacramento about local control, but when it comes to actually passing laws that respect that control, Sacramento has gone the wrong way. I believe that it should be up to jurisdictions like San Francisco to actually regulate something like noise. I also believe that it should be up to jurisdictions like San Francisco to actually regulate the hours of these bars and nightclubs. And one of the things that I'm going to do when I get to Sacramento is that I will make sure that we pass a law that allows San Francisco to change the time, if it chooses to do so, that these bars close and when alcohol can be served. I think there's a way to do so responsibly. I think that Mark Leno is right in pushing forward that legislation. And I challenge David Chiu, since he says that he is for nightlife, to come before this group today and to say that he would do the same. I think that it should be a given that the person who is, if the person is really for nightlife, that we advocate for as much local control as possible. The bottom line is that San Franciscans, not people in Sacramento, have a better sense of what is right for our city. And neighborhoods have a better sense that some bureaucratic ABC dictating what is right for our neighborhoods. I believe in local control, and I'm going to be a champion for local control. That's why I think so many people in this industry are supporting my candidacy.
David and I think alike on this issue. We absolutely need to have local control in many areas, but particularly when it comes to entertainment, because we thrive, our economy is based on the entertainment economy in ways that very few parts of California, maybe with the exception of Los Angeles, do. And so the idea that, for example, we ought to be able to set noise ordinances rather than having ABC set a statewide noise ordinance that's really based on noise levels in suburban and rural California, when we know here in San Francisco we have a higher ambient noise. And that is, and has been a long time frustration between the entertainment community and local neighborhoods and how the ABC goes about regulating their laws. Now, with regards to the issue of whether our nightclubs should be allowed to extend further into the night, this is absolutely something that I am supportive of. The idea that our city could decide which neighborhoods and when, this is local control. And I have had actually many conversations with Senator Mark Leno about this. We have a great working relationship, and he is looking for a partner in the Assembly who can work with him on issues to make sure that we get this done, to make sure that the State Assembly, which has been unable to pass Ellis Act reform, actually gets that done, and to make sure that that he has a partner in the State Assembly who can be effective at actually delivering results for our city.
Supervisor Campos, since you're in agreement, do you still wish to offer a response or rebuttal?
Well, I think that we've made our positions very clear, and I think that the thing about elected officials and politicians is that it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to actually do it. So let's make sure that it happens when we go to Sacramento.
Any comment?
I think you can judge us on our track record here in San Francisco and how we will do up in Sacramento.
Precisely.
I'm going to skip our next question, which had to do with Senator Mark Leno introducing bills that would have extended hours, and do you agree, that kind of thing. All right. Late night transportation, therefore, Supervisor Chiu will get to answer this one first. An audience member says, I live in the Sunset and wish it was easier for me to take advantage of the events in San Francisco. What good is preserving or improving the quality of San Francisco's nighttime entertainment options if residents do not have a safe way to get to and from these events? Supervisor Scott Wiener has recently created a late-night transportation working group to study ways to improve late-night transportation in San Francisco. The question is, what would you do as assemblyman to improve late-night transportation in the Bay Area?
Well, first and foremost, I would support more great late-night venues in the Sunset. But secondly, first of all, I want to take a moment to thank Supervisor Scott Wiener for his championing of nightlife, and in particular, in pushing this issue of late-night transportation. And I have worked with him closely on issues of how we fix Muni and how we fight for transportation, and I very much appreciate his support in my campaign. I am the candidate standing on the stage who does not have a car. And we know right now, and I know this personally, every day of the week, Muni is broken 40% of the time. We are walking or biking on some of the most dangerous intersections in the state, and for everyone who has to drive around a car, we're bumping along potholes and in massive congestion many days of the week. And this is why transportation is an absolute top priority for me. The state of California has been partially responsible for why we have a state of disrepair when it comes to our streets and when it comes to our transit. Because when Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger came into office, he eliminated billions of dollars that our city used to get in fixing Muni, fixing BART, fixing transportation. Now specifically, when it comes to how we tackle late night transportation, first of all, there is a survey that's being put out. I hope all of you have an opportunity to fill that out. I look forward to CMAQ and the transportation community coming together to give us their perspective, but a couple of things. One, I have been fighting in recent months to put taxi stands on Broadway, on Polk Street, and moving them into our entertainment quarters to make it easier. But that is only a part of the solution. A second piece of the solution is we need to extend our late night owl service on Muni, and we need more resources to do that. But I think the most important thing we can do is BART needs to be open beyond 12:15 in the morning. And we have lost billions of dollars when it comes to funding our BART infrastructure. And this is an important issue, not just for those of us that want to go out, have a good time, have a few drinks, and figure out how to get home. This is amazingly important for the workers of the nightlife, who work the other 5 to 9 job, who know that it is incredibly difficult when you get off at 2 a.m. to figure out how to get home, and you're faced with the choice of, do I leave my shift early so I can catch the last BART train home, or do I have to crash somewhere until the first 4:45 a.m. train? And so I look forward to helping to lead and champion state funding that we desperately need in order to make sure that folks who can't afford a cab every night or can't afford other means of transit have an opportunity with public transportation. This is an absolutely critical need. It is one of my top priorities, along with affordability when it comes to our housing, that I hope to tackle in Sacramento.
I do agree with what Supervisor Wiener is proposing in terms of his task force. I do think that we need to address this issue. The fact is that we cannot have the kind of nightlife and entertainment that we want to see without actually having transportation available to people. Nightlife constitutes right now about 3,200 businesses, nighttime businesses. that contribute more than $4 billion to the economy. I think it's only fair that we ask our local transit agency to actually make an investment that's commensurate with that contribution. And we do know that the night owl system leaves people stranded waiting for an hour or longer, and I think that something has to be done. One thing that I would say is that I actually have spent a lot of time in the area of transportation. I represent San Francisco on the Metropolitan Transportation Commission that actually provides funding for the 9-county Bay Area in the area of transportation. And I have proven to be effective in making sure that San Francisco actually gets more of its share of money. That's why we have programs like Free Muni for low-income and moderate-income youth, because we have actually brought in money and have convinced other jurisdictions to do the same. But I also want to be clear about something. I don't believe that money alone is the problem when it comes to our public transportation system. Yes, Muni needs money, but I also think that Muni needs transparency and accountability. And I believe that we need to have a governing structure that actually gives the riders more of a say in terms of how Muni actually operates. Because you can give them all the money in the world, but unless you actually have accountability and transparency, you're not going to make sure that the needs of the ridership are met. And the issue of nightlife is a perfect example of that. Can you imagine if there was another industry that contributed the amount of money that the entertainment industry does? $4.2 billion, and that the transit agency treated that industry the way that Muni has treated, or more accurately mistreated, this industry, it wouldn't happen. So we need to hold them accountable and say we deserve to be treated with the respect that we earn, because we make this economy be successful.
We move on to the next, and right now the last question, unless Terrence, we have clear questions, so let me know. All right. Supervisor Supervisor Campos will begin this one. Recently, a group of young entrepreneurs came up with an idea to use off-duty school buses to provide an affordable late-night transit option for workers and patrons. Though the business has been ready to launch since May, it has been stuck in red tape at the California Public Utilities Commission. The question is, given the regional government's seeming inability to address late-night transportation problems, what could you do at the state level to facilitate late-night transit innovations from the private sector?
Let me say this, that I think that this is yet another example of the fact that the California Public Utilities Commission is broken. Yeah. It's broken, it's not serving the people of the state of California properly. And I think the fact that they have failed to act in this area is another illustration of that. I certainly am committed to working with CMAQ in this community to make sure that at the state level we force the PUC to actually do the job that they're supposed to be doing. And that when you have lack of options, as is the case with transportation for nightlife, that when someone actually has an idea that they're trying to make a reality, that we actually figure out a way of helping them move that idea forward instead of actually creating obstacles. I do believe, though, that whatever is done, whether it's this idea or some other idea to increase transportation opportunities for nightlife and entertainment, I believe that it's important for people who work in the industry to actually have a seat at the table. Because unless that happens, you're going to have a situation where the state and this PUC bureaucracy can come up with rules that in fact are disconnected from the reality and the need of this community.
So I'm going to talk specifically on this idea. I love the idea. I love the idea that has been pioneered by the so-called night school of bringing yellow school buses to help transport folks after a wonderful night of maybe a couple drinks and some dancing, to be able to get on the back of a bus and hang out with your friends or that new loved one and make your way home. So I am happy to champion that. I'm happy to champion that here in San Francisco. I'm hoping that that is an idea that could spread to the East Bay and Oakland. And I do agree with David that the CPUC has not been particularly, has not worked well with our localities in figuring out and helping us how to do this. But it raises a broader question around innovation and creativity and our spirit as a city. We have always been a city where young people come from all over the world with their best ideas in how to make a society, a community better. And this yellow school bus idea is one of them. And we have to do everything we can to flourish it, to support it. And I have supported that innovation, that creativity, whether it is for entrepreneurs, whether it be for folks starting nonprofits, or whether it be for our artists. And I'm proud of the fact, and David Campos supported my policy to ask downtown developers to give 1% of their money to the arts, to local arts communities. And in fact, just a couple months ago, David again supported when I led to carve out $5 million from the mid-market area to make sure that we're supporting nonprofit organizations as well as the arts. We have to do better in supporting our artists and folks who are being creative and folks who are being innovative. This is what I've been doing for the past 6 years, and I hope to have the opportunity to do that if I'm honored to be your Senator.
1 minute.
Well, you know, with all due respect, David, I do believe that some of the things you have done have been a step in the right direction, but the reality is that if you ask the artist community, I think there's a lot more that we should be asking of the development community, and that's the problem. But I think that, you know, whether it's the deal that you cut with a developer on a specific project, whether it's the deal you cut with Google, whether it's the deal you cut with Twitter, the problem I have is that, well, indeed, it does bring something, some money. Where is the transparency? Where is the accountability? And where is the input from the communities that are actually impacted as to what actually is fair? That's the difference, that I am not going to go to back room to cut a deal with someone. I want to make sure that you, the constituents, actually have a say on what that agreement actually looks like. That's the difference.
David, I love how you criticize me for my record. One, that you have supported with your votes, but you criticize me for what I could have done more for the arts. It would have been nice if maybe you had proposed something and actually done something, delivered results for artists. And the fact of the matter is, Twitter and a number of companies are receiving a tax break of about $5 million a year. There were 2 different tax breaks. David Campos championed the larger one. But the $5 million a year that we're giving up in revenue have helped bring in $1.5 billion of new governmental resources for us to spend on the arts and on schools. And again, we had no idea how to figure out how to help every low-income kid under the age of 18 ride Muni for free for the next 2 years. And it was because of my work over 3 months, as opposed to your work, David, that helped to make this happen. And at the end of the day, there are artists who are receiving money because of our community arts fee requirement from downtown developers, who are going to be receiving part of the $4.5 million of the nonprofit rent stabilization program we have for artists, folks who have benefited from the Arts in the Storefront program that I helped to champion. And David, where were you? Where were you in helping to deliver that for San Francisco?
All right, your time is up, and because we have time, and this question from Twitter actually dovetails into your response, and you begin with your answer, Supervisor Chiu. So, from Twitter user named Awesome, the question is, how will you use money from the influx of tax revenue from tech companies in the city to support music and arts in San Francisco?
Well, awesome. Let me say a couple things. When I was in 3rd grade, my father gave me a violin. And I played the violin until I was in college. My time as a musician is what gave me skills, is what trained me in discipline. And I probably wouldn't be here as the president of your Board of Supervisors but for music education. And so this is why I have been such an advocate for making sure that kids today regardless of whether they're going to be the next performer on this stage, or whether they're going to be the next mayor or supervisor from District 3 or District 9. This is why arts education has been so critical to me. And I'll also say, one of the things that I hope to do in Sacramento is change two statistics. California, we are ranked 49th out of 50 states in what we spend per kid in the classroom. When it comes to arts funding, we are ranked 50 out of 50 states. I want to change that. I think we can do better. And we need to make sure that, again, we are training the next generation of San Franciscans, whether it be a 6-year-old ballerina from the Mission, whether it be the next spoken word artist from the Bayview, whether it be the next poet from Chinatown, or whether it be the next Harvard Law School educated attorneys who then decide to be fools and run for office. We need to make sure that our arts education is fully funded, and this is why I have worked closely with the arts education community around the School of the Arts here to make sure that we are pioneering and championing that institution, and this is why I will fight in Sacramento to make sure that my other 119 colleagues support this agenda for the future of our kids and the future of our state.
Dr. Campos?
You know, education and art education is definitely a passion for me, and I wouldn't be here without our public school system, and I have dedicated my life to that issue. Before I was elected to the Board of Supervisors, I was a lawyer for the San Francisco Unified School District, and I saw firsthand the impact that arts education can have in the life of a child. And I think it's great that we're asking these companies to do a little bit about that. I think it's helpful. But let's really be honest. Okay, that we cannot have art without the artists. And unless you actually do something to ensure that artists can actually live in San Francisco, you can put all the window dressing you want, but at the end of the day, we need to help artists stay in these communities. And that's where David and I have a different perspective. You know, I support the tech industry being in San Francisco. I think they're an important part of this community, and many of those tech workers have the same challenges with displacement that we're facing. But the problem I have is with the leadership of these companies that don't understand that they do have an impact in the cost of living of this city. They don't understand that if they're going to be successful in San Francisco, that they need to contribute something to this community. That they need to make sure that the neighborhoods that they're coming into
see how we can all thrive as one city, united.
Again, I think facts matter, and David, you know quite well that the tax break you're talking about is a tax break that it has been documented the city was not collecting. So I think you have to be truthful. But the point is this, that I do believe that how you approach the issue of taxation at the local level does reflect how you're going to approach that issue at the state level. And I think that by that measure, David and I do bring a different vision for how taxation should happen in the state of California. I believe that it is simply fair to ask big corporations to pay their fair share. I do believe that it is fair for us to have an equitable taxation system where the big guys actually pay at least the same that the little guys are paying. Because the reality is that that's not what happened in San Francisco, and it didn't happen, David, because of the policies that you supported.
And this is where, again, David is playing a little fast and loose with the law, or with the facts. Because the fact of the matter is, San Francisco, we were the only city in the state that thought it was smart to charge a regressive tax on worker salaries. And under my leadership, which David supported, in 2012, we are phasing out that tax. And we're doing exactly what David thinks we should do. We are increasing taxes on the most profitable. And all of the leaders of the entertainment community for what you are doing every day for our economy, for our city's vitality, for all of our fun. I want to thank Ben Torres for your very entertaining emceeing tonight. Please give a hand to Ben. And I also want to thank David Campos because It is not easy to be a candidate. You know, at the end of the day, what has been important for me over the past 6 years is, and for folks that are part of the entertainment community, our Chinese newspaper Singtao, the San Francisco Chronicle. I hope you can join the 3 San Franciscans who now hold statewide office who have supported me. And that is our Attorney General Kamala Harris, our U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein.
Thank you very much, Ben. Again, thank you, wonderful job, and thank you, CMAC, and thank you, members of this audience, residents of San Francisco, for being here. And David, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this stage with you. Let me say this, that as I noted at the beginning of this debate, we're both good people. We're good people who have different perspectives. And I do have a different perspective in terms of where this city is going. I do believe that we are at a crossroads in the history of San Francisco. And I do believe that we need to change course. It is simply unacceptable to me that as we are the wealthiest city in this country, we're also the most unequal city in this country. I believe that we do have indeed a tale of 2 cities where you have so few doing so well when the vast majority of us are being left. 17th Assembly District. And the 17th Assembly District is the most progressive assembly district of any district in this state. What this assembly district needs is someone who's going to be a champion for regular people. The reason that Tom Amiano, that Mark Leno have been effective is not because they went to Sacramento to play footsie with Republicans, because they went to Sacramento with conviction, to push the envelope and to make sure that working people in the state of California have a fighting chance. If you are happy with the extent of the inequality we face, if you are happy with the fact that the bottom 20% are making 17 times less than the top 5%, then you should not vote for David Campos. You should vote for David Chiu. But if you believe that San Francisco is headed in the wrong direction and that we need to save the city for working people and middle-income people, for artists and entertainers, then I ask you to join this campaign. This campaign is not about David Campos. This campaign is about you. It's about who we are as a city. We are taking it back. And even though he has a lot of money, millions of dollars on the other side, the reason why we are winning this campaign is because we have people behind us. And I will take people over money any day. Join us November 4th. Vote for David Campos.
Thank you. That concludes our debate. I just want to say thanks first to you for being here, for caring enough to be here, and voicing your own opinions on occasion. Thanks to CMAC, especially to Terrence and Guy, to Natasha and Steve for having me here, especially Lauren Weinstein in the front row, keeping time. And thanks to the 2 David C's, who I think you saw out of the corner of your eye sometimes for time signals, because you were both really, really good. So I appreciate that. We have 2 excellent candidates for Assemblyman District 17. It's going to be a hard choice, and it's yours. Thank you very much. Good evening.